Welcome to episode 4, I think it is, of Reiclosers, Real Estate Investing Closers. We got Peter Lymberopoulos. How do you pronounce your last name?
It was pretty close. It's Lymberopoulos.
Lymberopoulos. So you're a senior at University of Oklahoma. Peter sold alarms for a little bit with me, then solar, then doing some real estate stuff. He's got an Airbnb similar to the one we're sitting in right now. So we're sitting in my property in Norman, Oklahoma, kind of near OU's campus. We'll go deep into how this guy right here went into sales in college, really at, I think, 18, his whole sales experience, how he was able to create, a high income while not in school, and then get into real estate and get his first property as was it a junior in college?
Junior in college, yep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
20 years old.
He had to one up me. I went in and got it my senior year, and he comes around and gets it his junior year. So 18 years old, was that your first sales experience, or what? How'd you get started in sales?
Yeah, so the my first exposure, well, actually kind of sidetracked to why I decided to get into sales when I was 18. Talked to a guy I considered a mentor at the time. I tore my knee up playing basketball, and there was a medical sales guy who was in on my surgery. Long story short, kind of got connected with him, started picking his brain a little bit, and I was like, hey, I'm 17, whatever, about to graduate high school. Like, what should I do? Job, get some kind of experience. I know he was doing extremely well in medical sales, pretty lucrative industry. But talking to him, and he was like, dude, you just need to get in on, whatever you can, whether it's selling printers, cars, whatever you possibly can. That turned into, walked up and down the street, one of the massive streets with all the car dealerships in Tulsa, knocked on as many of them as I can, walked in, asked for, a job application, and
No way.
Not many car dealerships are hiring 18-year-old guys with no experience, right?
So this is from after you had a knee injury, the guy that helped you out with it, was it a family friend?
Nope. So I originally obviously knew the doctor, kind of talked him through that, and then this guy, he sold the medical equipment doing both me and my brother had a couple knee surgeries. So
bad knees in the family.
Yeah, family was kind of frequent flyers around the operating table. So got connected with him that way, and kind of just started picking his brain a little bit. So that was ultimately what got me into looking at sales.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's right. I honestly don't think I even knew that. I remember you said you were selling cars, but this is like a long story because I met Peter when I was the recruitment chairman for our fraternity. So I was rush chair, recruitment chairman, whatever you want to call it. And I guess that was my first sales experience, which I talked about with the first episode a little, because I had probably like 60 kids at once just in my phone, constantly inviting them to these parties that we probably aren't supposed to be having, but we're doing it every weekend and every other fraternity. It's very competitive. But I met Peter at one of the events with some of the other guys we were recruiting. And it's funny, I remember you had an AC/DC shirt on. And some of the guys on our rush team were like, who's this guy with the AC/DC shirt on? And then we just like prejudged you completely. Until I met you, I was like, oh, this guy's a stud. But had no idea that you just went, or that it was from that guy, and then that you went through all the car dealerships. So you literally, did you just drive and then stop by, went and parked, and then just got out and said, hey, I want to apply?
Pretty much. Yeah, just walked into, whoever was sitting at the front desk and said, hey, do you guys have hiring manager, sales manager, whoever? I just want an application, and only one guy hit me back, and that was the guy I ended up working for. He called me in for an interview, and he said, you've got no experience. You really don't have much reason I should hire you at all. And I just told him, I said, listen, I just want some kind of sales gig. I don't care what it's whatever it is. You don't have to pay me. I just want the experience. I'm 18 years old. I don't care. I'm going to college after this summer anyway. And he said, dude, I love the drive. You can come sell full commission. You don't sell a car, I'm not going to pay you. Well, let's do it. So
okay.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Turned into a summer gig for me.
So when you went into these dealers, I guess how many do you think you walked in?
Oh, I probably went to 6 or 7 on that street.
Okay. Which number was that guy?
He was probably the second or third I talked to.
Okay, so you just went to 6 of them on basically the same road.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going in trying to find like a specific person? Or you just said, hey, who's your hiring
manager? Sometimes it was the lady sitting at the front desk or something that would point me to the right person, or sometimes I would get to go up to the sales floor and just talk to the guy and be, hey, do you guys have applications, whatnot? So I only walked out with about 3 applications. Only about half of them even gave me an application.
But you were 18, right?
hmm
Okay, and they wouldn't even give you an application, or they said they weren't hiring.
They just, yeah, we're not hiring, or you got to have XYZ experience, something like that. So
Someone comes into the car lot, you got to have a lot of sales experience for
I
that.
guess so, right?
I'm just kidding.
What's
There's
typically, they look for people with, finance degrees that
right.
ultimately want to move into the finance part, of the transaction. So they start a couple years or even a year on the sales floor, and then they move back into the finance department. So,
Gotcha.
but a lot
Yeah.
of people selling new cars end up doing.
Okay. That's crazy. So that's the year that I guess the summer when we met, right? Were you just doing it the summer going into college?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I met you. It would have been right in the middle of that summertime. So you're going to rush events on the weekend. You're coming home and you're working at a car dealership. Are you answering the phone? What do the sales look like? I mean, obviously there's people coming in, but what role did you have at the dealership?
So I went through a little bit of a training process, but after that, once the training wheels were off, it was pretty much, I got the full experience where I was
Mm,
in on the training meetings every morning. I was, had still the same rotation as the guys that were selling, 30 cars a month, same time slot on the sales floor. It works rotationally based.
okay.
We would have an app where there was a pecking order, and you would spend a certain amount of time, slots 10 through 3 were sitting at your desk cold calling, following back up with leads through your CRM, stuff like that. 3 and 2 might have been standing by the front doors, and then 1 was you had the ability to walk the lot and see whoever was, poking their head into Forerunner or a
Whoever was
Tundra.
pecking, what did you call it? Pecking order?
Yeah, essentially, I guess, right? And then that order would just rotate from
Yeah.
there, so everybody would kind of get a fair
Okay.
share.
Gotcha. Yeah, because there's definitely the people I feel like that right when you inquire, they immediately call your phone. I get some of those.
Right.
Whoever gets that number in there, but that's crazy. So car sales, I mean, went straight to it. Like I feel like everyone hears about the car salesman. Obviously, there's people that do great in every sales industry, but
Right.
that whole first summer, I guess, because that's your first sales experience. What did it? Was it 4 months, 3 months doing that?
Yeah, I think it was 3 months. The first year, I think with COVID, I got hired on a little bit late after that application process. It was about 2 months the first year, and then that
Okay.
second summer when I did it, it was the full three
Okay,
months.
so it was the summer going into freshman year of college, and then after freshman year, you did it again.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so I did it for 2 summers.
So how was the commission? Like, I guess when you're doing that, I don't remember if that's when cars were up or how that was going, but um, you're on the phones, you're doing all commission, right? There's no salary or no base pay or anything
Mm-mm.
like that. Okay. What did it look like for, I guess, a commission on a deal, and how many deals do you think you got in?
So there was a couple different ways the commission would go. You would make essentially a share of the profit that the dealership would bring in. So say, on this sale, uh, your commission was 30%.
Mm,
The first 1,000% would go to the owner of the dealership or the dealership itself. Say you made 3,000 on the deal, the first 1,000 goes to the dealership. And then there's 2 grand left for you to make that 30% split. But car
okay.
dealerships, a lot of the times, just to move into inventory, especially in a time like COVID,
Right.
when there was a huge supply chain issues. Everybody knows about the chips and everything. The car lots were almost empty.
Yeah.
We were selling a lot of paper, right? Pre-orders for the cars. As soon as they got in, they were automatically going to our customers. But that first summer, when there was a little bit more inventory and we were trying to move more, you'll you know actually sell a car at a loss sometimes. And at that
Oh,
point, you'll
geez.
just make what's called a mini, and that's anywhere from $250, $300.
So it's like
So,
a standard amount. Okay.
mm-hmm.
So I mean, I don't want to get into cars or any of that too much, but how much do you think you made? I guess doing car sales during that time during the summers.
I probably made, each of those years. The first year I probably made 3 or 4 grand. Second year
Yeah.
probably made like 5 grand.
Right.
So for an 18, 19-year-old kid, of course that
Yeah.
was okay. This will be
Yeah.
nice to go into college with, but obviously not anything insane.
Yeah.
But
But if you did any other job, you probably make the same amount or less, right?
probably less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit, I would assume. I'm trying to think what we did delivering pizzas, and I don't think we were making 5 grand in the summer, but that's pretty cool. So you get the sales experience. Now you have that learning. You get some little more income. You go into the next year, and then I guess how did you find your next sales experience? He came into door to door. I asked that question like I didn't know, but I go back from my first summer of doing sales at Vivint, doing the whole summer selling smart home security. And it's funny because I'm texting Peter back and forth. He's running some of the recruitment stuff for the fraternity, and then he starts seeing what I'm doing. I'm telling him about it. I'm like, dude, you're doing this next summer. Like I already knew it from the get go. I was like, I got to go find Peter, and then from there it's just going to spread. So that's exactly what I did. I like went back first month of school, and then went out to lunch with Peter and a couple other guys, and just showed them about the opportunity. And I don't know if you were on board from the get go, but it seemed like it.
Yeah, it definitely was something where you kind of have to filter through, the guy coming back from school and he's like, "Listen, I just made like 90 grand or whatever it is," right? Where it's like, okay, your BS radar goes off a little bit and you're like, "Okay, let's like actually talk about this and see if like this could actually make sense. Like, what
Yeah.
were you doing? Like, give me kind of the whole scoop." But I feel like as soon as, those lunch meetings, us texting back and forth, we started talking a lot, getting kind of that more info with it and being like, okay, like this seems legit, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where I wasn't, maybe not 100% sold and was a little skeptical about it until, going on that first blitz trip. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is real, right? This
Yeah.
this can work. This can work for me, kind of thing. So,
Yeah. And we touched on that a little bit in the last episode too, but the blitz trips, it's funny. I think the biggest thing with sales, especially door to door, everyone thinks, pyramid scheme. And it's like, I'm not even recruiting for this anymore, but it's just cool because it changed our lives. But yeah, you're not making anything unless you sell. Obviously, when you're bringing on guys, you're training them, you're selling. So I brought out Peter, probably 12 other guys originally, but I take them on this blitz trip while they're still in school. We go for what, 4 or 5 days if we could, maybe 6.
right.
And they could kind of dodge some classes for school, and they shadow me, learn how to sell. And immediately Peter, I think his first day on his own selling, maybe second, sold 2 deals. Pretty similar story to what I did. And it was, I think I sat in the first one you were with, closed it with you. It was getting dark. I don't know what time it was. It was like the
It
winter.
was, yeah, so it was winter time, so the sun definitely set earlier, but sun was
Yeah.
down and I was knocking on
Yeah.
this door and, I
I
remember
remember. Yeah.
getting in and I was like, man, like, I need you again, bro. And you're like, you need me again? Like, let's go. And you're like, all
Yeah.
right, I'll go over there. Let's get it done. So,
Yeah. We closed the first one at, I think it was like 7:30, but it was this time of year where it was pretty dark. And he's like, "Oh, I mean, should I just get in the car? We'd be done." And I'm like, "Dude, you just sold a deal. Like, this is the best chance for you to go get another deal." So he just went and knocked like, I don't know, 6 more doors, and just calls me again like 30 seconds later. He's like, "Hey, come help me close this one." I'm in, like, they're ready to go. So I walked over there. They knew they already had them sold, or he did. He already had them sold, but he just didn't know how to do all the stuff on the iPad yet. So I just went in, got it all set up, got the tech over there, and then he got 2 deals that night. So that came out to be, I mean, I guess you got paid the following week or so. What'd you end up getting paid on those deals?
those first 2 deals probably made $500 each, so about $1,000 on those. And
Yeah.
then I think I had another two. Those first 2 deals came on my first day of knocking, and then I think we went on it was like a 5, maybe 6 day blitz. The first 3 days were training. That first day on my own got two, and then the rest of the week, which was another 2 or 3 days, got another two. So ended up making a little bit over. I think it was somewhere between like 2,500 and 3,000
Yeah.
from that trip. So going back to school after a week off of classes with just as much money as I'd made,
From the
selling cars in
summer.
my pocket, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
like let's see what we can do with this kind of thing. So
Yeah. And that's the same experience that everyone has. And that's why we took y'all out on that. But it was cool because you definitely studied it. You're on top of it. It's like there's a reason that, you did so well with it. But yeah, you go out there and it's like he starts reverse engineering the same thing. It's like, if I can do this much in a week, how many can I do in the full summer? And then what can I make, coming back to school the following year? So
right.
that was going into your junior year, right? So you're looking at sophomore year when you're running on these blitzes, right?
Hmm.
And then obviously we had the whole transition. So we go in, we're ready to send it to Colorado for the summer. And I think March, month or two before school ends, we say, "Hey, we're going to sell solar. Never mind." And that was pretty hard to tell all of y'all. I was definitely excited because I was like, "Hey, I get to stay home. We get to make more money doing the same job. Obviously, we're taking a risk because we already knew we could sell Vivint." But I remember I think I called you first too because I was like, you already had 6 sales going in the summer. You were pumped for it all, and I was kind of scared because I don't know what's going to happen. But I called you, and then we were obviously all on board. We're like, okay, if I'm going, we're all going. Um, and then
I
we
kind
went
of
up.
kind of remember getting that call and be like, well, I know I just figured out I can do Vivint. Now this is something
Yeah.
different now. So I'm like, okay, like
Yeah.
we'll see. So I remember being a little at first kind of like freaked out, but yeah, it obviously to the end of the story works out pretty well for us. But
Yeah, I mean that was if you can sell, I think you can sell anything. It's definitely just the same process, a new product. Um, but yeah, we went out to Dallas, got all that going. I mean, it was a mess, honestly. That beginning, we were figuring out.
guinea pigs.
Yeah, we were the guinea pigs, and y'all were supposed to be following us, which made it pretty hard because it felt like we needed everything in place, but you were just experiencing a kind of a cluster.
Right.
So a lot of people definitely fizzled out. I mean, it was 1,000 degrees in Dallas, and you're out there
1,000
knocking.
might be an understatement,
Yeah, 1,000 and humid. But yeah, we're out there and setting appointments, which I mean, you killed that. I mean, solar was definitely there, but it was a little newer. And you go out, I think the first week, you're probably setting 3 to 4 appointments a day, right? So every house that you're knocking on, basically they're interested, and they might say f off, and then the people that are interested, you're probably setting an appointment with. But
honestly.
we're going in there, we're closing behind it, and then you probably didn't see a check. I mean, your first month and a half of solar, when do you think you saw the first paycheck for that summer?
It was probably around that mark, maybe like that month and a half mark. Really
Yeah,
wasn't into maybe like the middle of July until that first commission check rolled in.
right.
So
So that's the hardest part is these deals with solar got installed way later. You're not getting paid the following week like alarms, so you didn't get paid the 500-600 bucks on the alarm, which typically it was half that, right, up front, and then you had a back end check. But with solar, once it's installed, you get the whole thing, right?
hmm
So you're waiting a little longer, but you're getting the full amount for a larger ticket item. But
right.
so you waited a month and a half. Same with us. It was crazy. We didn't see a paycheck for that long. We have some deals going in, stuff's canceling, then some's moving through the pipeline. Finally, like a few installs start hitting, but at the end of the day, like who knows? You might have made more selling for alarms. You might have made the same, but you also were just setting appointments. So you eventually got to get into a position where you were closing. So after that first summer doing sales, you were the top setter, I would say, on the team. I mean, there was a
hmm
couple other guys that definitely gave you a run for the money and did very similar. But how many deals do you think you had installed on that summer?
That first summer, I don't know the exact number. I think it was 14,
Yeah.
15. It was something like that.
Okay.
So
Which means you probably had like 30 plus signed deals,
right,
if I had to
yeah.
guess.
It's
We had
it
a
was
lot
like
of,
yeah, I think our pull through rate was probably right around 50%. So
yeah, it was tough going from alarms to solar, figuring out how to manage the pipeline from someone that you're used to installing the same day. Now it's taking a month.
well, and I feel like that's where our biggest learning curve was, and like not to speak on your behalf because obviously that first summer
Yeah.
you were closing, but like going from alarms, like we knew how to sell, like taking like the little experience I even had and setting an appointment, like I could do that no
Yeah.
question. You could sit down at anybody's table and like close that no question. But
Yeah.
like where getting over the hump was like getting those deals to pull through install. So
Right. Yeah. And this is like fascinating looking back at this because to those that have never done door to door, it's like selling an alarm. You sell it, and you're like, yeah, technician's over. He's literally knocking
right,
on the door, and they're getting it installed. So chances of them canceling were very low. Whereas in solar, I was like, oh, close it, on to the next, and then I text them like 3 days later, haven't updated them at all.
yeah,
They're like, oh, do I really want solar?
yeah.
And then boom, they cancel, and you're like 10 grand commission out the drain. So that's what's crazy about sales is people say solar coaster or sales
hmm
roller coaster, and it's like it's real. You get my first 6 deals that I had sold were pretty much self gen, meaning I set them and then I closed them, which was like 8 to 12 grand in commission, and I was 6 of them in a row just canceled. I just watched like $70,000, $80,000 down the drain
Yeah.
from the get go, and I'm like,
Happened to me that second summer too when I
oh
was in
yeah,
self-training. I was like, there's $100,000 on the table that just canceled on me. So it's
yeah,
like, it is what it is, I guess.
yeah. You
But
see the potential, and you're like right there, but then it's just a mental. That's the hardest part about the job. It's all mental, and that's like everything with all commission. That's crazy. So like, how did you decide? I guess yes, you saw like proof of concept a little bit, but were you always like, I'm gonna go do commission, not go do some finance? Because what's your degree right now?
finance and accounting.
Okay, so was there a reason you wanted to go do this instead of go into finance or get some sort of position that I might do this outside of college?
Right. Yeah, I think that's something that I know some people kind of tussle with is, do I want kind of the comfortable salary based thing or do I want to, kind of take with the eat what you kill mentality
Yeah,
type thing where it's, go out and make commission where to a lot of people it's uncomfortable, but I feel like a huge part in being able to kind of get over that hump or that that roadblock with deciding that was actually going out and seeing some proof of concept, which is where people go their whole entire careers without ever exposing themselves to that proof of concept. I think so. I think that's where I feel lucky and blessed is that I decided to take that step when there wasn't much for me to risk. Right, like I
Yeah.
don't have a wife, don't have kids. Right now, I have a mortgage. At the time, I didn't. Right,
Yeah.
but I wasn't risking much. Right, if
Yeah.
I went out that first summer and flopped, it
Yeah.
was okay. I'm sorry, mommy, I'm coming home type thing. Right,
Yeah.
but going out and taking that step while I was young and exposing myself to risk at a young age and stepping out is where I think I was like, okay, now I've exposed myself to it. I know I can do it. I know how lucrative this can be. Now let me continue to go and do that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the craziest thing. The same thing with me, even as like going into senior year. It's like I got one more year left to basically I'm gonna go do this 9 to 5 job that I know I won't like,
Mm-hmm.
or I go try this and then I've seen a few deals, right? It's like if I can go make 2, 3 times what I'm gonna make outside of college, why wouldn't I go do it? So I just like didn't recruit anyone. I'm just like figure this out. But that's the same thing I think everyone has. Like once you see it, you realize there's a lot more potential. But back to that. So yeah, you're doing solar. That first summer you finish, you get 14 installs. This is your sophomore year or going into junior year of college. So what did you end up bringing in? Do you think on those 14 installs?
It was somewhere between not the exact number, but somewhere between like $35,000-$40,000.
Okay. And that was, and you show up, so junior year of college now.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 2 more years left of school and you just made 35, 40 grand. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so for when you got back to school, I guess you similarly had the same thoughts. I don't know if it was because of me or if you always want to get into real estate, but what got you intrigued with real estate to kind of pathway actually into that now?
Right. So I actually, like, as a kid, had always been fascinated by real estate. Like
Okay.
my mom used to like come in my room and I would have the grid paper and I would be drawing out floor plans like architects. Like I would look up floor plans, I would copy them and change them, and I would like design my own homes. Like the dream was always I wanted to build lakefront, golf course, and mountain top properties. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be an architect. Like this is the deal.
That's the
Like
best 3 spots right there.
right, exactly. Well, obviously, pretty big dream, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. And then it wasn't really until I was like got a little bit older, and I was like, oh, it's not really the architects, it's the people that build them or that own the homes that make the most money.
Yeah.
It's all the landlords. So I was like, okay, this is cool, right? Kind of got into the whole finance thing, studying business, knew I wanted to get into to real estate, and that was another thing that kind of intrigued me about following in your footsteps was seeing that proof of concept again with you buying this place here we're sitting in, renting it out, seeing how much money you're making from doing that, what kind of cash flow a short-term rental brings, and then talking to some other people. We have some other connections here in the area too, talking to them, getting kind of their insight. It was like, okay, I gotta, I can put my money here and make, a little bit of return, which is always smart to put your money somewhere. Or, kind of going back to again, I'm young, I don't have that much to risk. If I lose
Yeah.
this money, like I know I'm gonna make $30,000 again at some point in my life, hopefully, right? Go out on a limb, do something I want to do, and just go
Yeah.
for it.
So that was when you got back to school. Because that's crazy, the architect thing. I don't think many 8-year-old kids were probably drawing on
Right.
houses. That's crazy. Your mom's probably like, "What's wrong with this kid?"
There
Um,
probably was more than one time she said that,
yeah,
but
but this kid's gonna be a killer sales rep one day. But so you go back to school, and then you wanted to get into real estate. Obviously, you saw what I did with this property, which was nice because I mean the real estate is cheap here. How long did it take you to figure out? Because I know the interest rate started to climb up. This was last
hmm
year. So what? How long did it take you to find a property, and what did you start doing when you got back to school?
So as soon as I got back to school, kind of, I still had a little bit until all the money came in. Obviously, with the type of window solar gets installed in, and then obviously you got to wait a week or two for the check to come in there. So once all the money got in, I got connected with a realtor. I was hey, here's my goal. Connected with lenders. I was like, got to get pre-qualified, all that kind of stuff beforehand, which was the toughest part for me. It was you need the the 2 years of work experience, need all that kind of the proof for the lenders to be able to get approved. And I obviously didn't have 2 years of consistent work experience being in college. Sure, I had $40,000 in the bank, and the lender was like, I know you can make the payments for a very long time on this house, but we're gonna need
Yeah.
a co-signer. So it was going to family. I talked pretty extensively with my family, my grandparents, and it was, hey, I need some help here. Here's my goal. Here's what I want to do. And at first, that was, get the house, kind of special 5% conventional loan, live in one part of it for the rest of the time I was in college, rent the rest out to roommates. I
Yeah.
showed them all the numbers. Here's what I was going to rent it out for. Here's what I was going to make, or even just us save on rent while I'm here in college. And then some things changed with leases and stuff like that, so decided to put it up for short term.
Yeah.
And was able to see kind of the pretty extensive cash flows that come from that now.
That's crazy. So I want to break this down though, because this is nuts. I know we did this is like almost the same story to what I did. You just did it a year prior, which is sweet. So you come back, you're junior, you look at, I think a lot of people don't like think about how to get a house, because this is just like on market. So like we're doing now is a ton of off market stuff, which isn't easy for someone just working like a 9 to 5 job to all of a sudden become a real estate investor and market to all these off market properties that are distressed or foreclosures. It's like you got to go to someone that has that deal to find it. But for both of these that we got, our first deals they're on market, so they're on Zillow, right? We got in touch with a realtor. Mine was when the market was blowing up. Like if I didn't put an offer in that day, it was gone by the end of the night. So that's what's crazy about that time. Whereas for you, the interest rates started to go up, right? So when you were looking at it, were you just going on Zillow, or was the agent sending you, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and he was just sending you stuff?
It was actually one that I found on Zillow. Or we used the same realtor.
Yeah.
He wasn't incredibly fond of it from the beginning, but
Really?
he's like, you really want to check this one out? And I was like, I think this one for real has some potential. Ended up being the one we got. So
What did he not like about it?
well, so one of the big things we kind of had to tackle was so it's a 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom with a converted garage that's now a bedroom. So the previous owners, they were Airbnb it out too.
Yeah.
So I kind of had, obviously when you see a 4 bed, 1 bath, which is what it was listed at, it was like, okay, that's kind of weird. How are we going to make that work type of thing? So that was part of the process when, we went through for tours, and after we had it under contract, was bringing a contractor in and be like, hey, do we keep this as a 3-1 and find something else to do with this spare converted garage? Or do we bring a contractor in and turn what this laundry room was that connected to the converted garage into another bathroom?
Okay.
Almost make that the master bathroom, then have it be like a 4-2. Ultimately decided after getting the contractor in there, it was going to be anywhere from like $10,000 to $12,000 to put in
a bathroom.
Yeah, convert that laundry room into a bathroom, which I was really considering at the time. And then it wasn't until we talked to somebody you and me both know here, and he was like, hey, my 3-1, my 3 bed, 1 bath does the best out of all my properties here in Norman.
That's crazy.
Do with that info what you will. And then that was kind of for me, after seeing some of his numbers and talking to him a little bit more about that, decided to keep that as a 3-1 and turn the other converted garage into, hung like a 100-inch projector screen in there, put a projector, ping pong tables, all kinds of stuff, decked it out with, Baker Mayfield, Brian Bosworth posters, all that kind of stuff. So kind of made it a unique selling point to
made it the OU room.
Exactly.
OU football. It's again huge here. Shout out David Wise. I didn't even mention him last time, but yeah, our buddy in our fraternity, his dad had 3 Airbnbs, and that's kind of who helped me run the numbers, make sure this was going to make sense. And then we looked at Peter's, the same thing. One of his properties that kills it the most is 3 bed, 1 bath. People come here for a couple of nights. I mean, yeah, the people stay for a week sometimes, but it's short term, so they don't typically. It's not the biggest deal if they don't have a second bathroom. Obviously, maybe they come to mine instead of yours sometimes because it's got two bathrooms. But we created our own competition basically against ourselves. Like David has 3 properties, or 2 or 3, and then I got 1, and we're trying to see who can charge the most for game days, and he always beats us just because
David always wins.
I think he's more willing to put it at a high price, and then he knows if I don't get this, I'm just going to stay there, and then he ends up getting like $2,000 a night for a graduation or a big football game, and we're like sitting here with $1,000, like thinking it's awesome, and then he shows us that. which is crazy. So
I still may hold the record for biggest booking though, I think, which was my very
yeah, well,
first one,
I'll
which is
get to that
crazy.
because this is nuts when you look at a cash on cash return. So we're talking real estate now is like one of the biggest metrics that people talk about in real estate is cash on cash, meaning what is the money I put into this, and within a year, what's the money I get back? So what is that cash on cash return? So you take your cash flow, the net profit, and divide it by the money that you're into it year one. So say, for this property for me, I think I was all in down payment, closing costs, furnishing, probably like $32,000. So it was about 6,000 plus closing costs, like 15,000 total. And then I had to furnish it, which was like 10. I had to add electrical in the back, fix these steps, some miscellaneous stuff. So about 32,000 in. And then I netted about almost $1,000 a month average. So some of these football months I was cash flowing 3 to 4 thousand bucks a month. January and February, sometimes I'm losing a little bit of money. So about $1,000 a month. So 12,000, 13,000. Divide that by 32, whatever that cash on cash return is, something around 30 something percent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great cash on cash return, especially when real estate investors are typically looking at long term rentals and trying to get like 12%, right? 12 to 14.
Right.
So that's what's cool is, yeah, you're getting a higher percent return. So now for your deal breakdown on this is what blew my mind. So he's trying to figure out with me, with Brandon, our realtor, like, is this going to make sense? Is this worth it? I don't want to get in over my head. Like, my interest rate's a little high. It's what, 6% now?
6% flat. Yeah.
Okay, and I got this when it was 3%, so my payment's like just over $1,000.
Right.
So your monthly mortgage payment is what?
It's just around 1,100 escrow with property taxes and insurance. It ends up being like 1450.
Oh, 1450. Okay, I thought it
Yeah.
was a little more than that. That's still so cheap compared to any other real estate,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the house was 192,000.
Yep.
Okay, so you put 5% down on a $192,000 house. This is when the market's going up. So what? Just break down this whole deal so we can kind of do what I just did with the cash on cash return.
Right. So I was making that 35 $40,000 that that first summer. I wasn't necessarily in the position where I had the 30,000 to go all in on a property like you did
Yeah.
with the down payment, a bunch of furnishing costs, put electrical in a shed. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to get a little creative here and let my realtor know that as well too. But the property we found was actually held by an investor as well who was Airbnb, like I said, back in Texas, and he was wanting to get out of it because there was a new investment in Texas that he had to free up some money for, and they were really only coming up staying game days in this house. So kind of I was able to score a pretty good deal. Obviously, did the 5% down payment. Ended up being like 10,000 roughly, right, a little bit less. Um, but it was already furnished extremely well, right? They
Yeah.
did a really good job furnishing it pretty uniquely and making it appealing on Airbnb. So I got it for the sale price they listed. I only brought that around 10,000 down to the table. They threw in the furniture as a hassle. They wouldn't have to move it all back to Texas, keep it in a storage unit, whatever it was, and they also covered the closing costs. So legit, all I really had to do to get this house was bring like $10,000 to the table, send it in the wire, sign off on it, and it was mine.
Yeah, that's nuts. So I think to most people that think they have to get into real estate, they need like all this money, and you're like, yeah,
Right.
you had to go make $10,000 first, right? But for most people, don't think of closing costs too. I didn't realize that until I bought this house. I'm like, oh, 5% down on 188,000, like $6,000, and then they hit me with all the closing costs, and that was when the market was up, right? I was like, I was paying all these closing costs,
Right.
so it was, or you split it, I can't remember, but it ended up coming out to be like 15, 16,000. I was like, six. I
Yeah.
thought this was gonna be $6,000, like,
Right.
so the fact that they paid the whole closing costs, they have all this furniture in there. We should have just been sitting in that place too, so you can see it, but very nicely done. It's updated. Obviously, older house, kind of like this, but renovated. So you're 10 grand in. You say that's all you had to do. So backtrack a little bit. You had to get your grandparents to co-sign.
Yep.
Okay.
So grandparents were co-signing on that, and actually, funny story that kind of happened with the closing process. So my grandparents are up in Tulsa, where I'm from, and we were
Mm,
closing on the deal here in Moore. So they had signed from Tulsa, got a notary to
mm-hmm.
see watch them sign and send in the letters, right? So on closing day, right? They were scheduled to arrive, whatever. They went to the UPS warehouse, whatever it is in Oklahoma City. Somehow went all the way to Detroit, and it snowed in Detroit. So it got stuck there for like a week. And I'm like sitting there biting my nails, like the closing date keeps getting moved back. And like, of course, I'm just like super anxious. So I'm
Yeah.
like, is this gonna happen? Is this gonna go through? So my down payment originally was gonna be like closer to like 9,500 or whatever,
Uh-huh.
10,000, but ended up being a little bit more because we passed, our date, and we ended up going into February. It ended up being like February 2nd or 3rd or something like that. So
Yeah.
then I had to pay additional interest payment for February, and I was like, dang, are you
Uh,
kidding me? So I had to bring a little bit more money to the table, but yeah, that's essentially how that kind of went down.
that's crazy because I had a similar thing happen. I think I remember whenever you called me, you're like, "Yeah, I'm supposed to close." Then it got delayed because like when I went to close on my house, Brandon and I never closed on a house before, right? So I was like co-signed with my dad, and I'm just thinking, "Oh, I'm bringing all the money. I'm doing this." Like,
Right.
kind of forgot he was even involved. And then the morning of, I was like, "Yeah." Like my dad just called me just to see what's up. Like not even know about the house. He didn't even know. I don't know if he knew today was the close date. And I was like, yeah, like I'm closing on the house at like 1:30, I think, at the title company. He's like, oh, nice. And he's like, do I have to be there? And I was like, I don't know. Like, he's like, can you call him right now? And I was like, sure. I called Brandon. He's like, yeah, he's got to sign. And I was like, he's like, unless we do a mobile notary, but then it's gonna delay it, and these sellers like need it out.
Right.
So I was like, well, crap. So I called my dad back immediately. He's like, luckily he worked from home, and he was just like, yeah, I'll leave right now. So he drove from Dallas to Norman at like 9 a.m., maybe 10 a.m. Got there right as I got there to sign, like at the
Right.
same time. So it was pretty cool. I ended up just like staying the night in Norman.
Right.
But it was, yeah, funny small world. But so look back that you have 10 grand that you put in, you send the wire. So looking at cash on cash return now. So you have this fully furnished and it's pretty much ready to go on Airbnb, which is crazy because I guess a lot of people, what I would think is like, looking at this now, like, why didn't I just go buy this? Right?
Right.
Like, why wasn't everyone hopping on this? Like, take the furniture, like, all this stuff that seemed good. How long was it on the market?
It was on the market for a little bit over a month. I think it was like 40 days.
That's
So
so
it was, I
crazy.
mean,
Yeah.
it was kind of just like one of those, for my situation, hidden gems that was just like sitting there waiting on me type thing, right?
Yeah.
Where we had clicked on that listing like multiple times.
Yeah.
And Brandon was like, I still think you got some better options out there. Let's just
Yeah.
kind of keep looking. And eventually I was like, dude, I want to take a tour of it. Like, let's at least go look at it.
Yeah.
So we got to check that out. But it was hard to find times to take tours because it was booked up on Airbnb, stuff like that. So
Oh, right.
we were trying to coordinate all that was a little bit difficult too, but
That's
ended up
crazy.
working
So a
well.
month or a month and a half, which is nuts. Just looking at the market, because
Right.
again, I couldn't even. I had to put offers in like same day. This was actually the only one that was up for longer than like a week. And it was because they had it listed too high. So we just
Right.
finally threw a lower low ball offer, and then they countered at it. But so a month and a half, you finally go tour it, and then you just put in the asking price.
Pretty much. Well, we put in the asking price, but then we asked for the furniture and the closing costs covered too.
Okay.
We might have asked for, I think we asked for just a little bit less than the closing price, and they asked for like 2,500 more, and then we just ended up meeting at the
Yeah.
asking price, and I was like, okay, well, we shouldn't have even done this first place. Let's just
Yeah.
ask for the asking price. But no, it was kind of cool to go through like that first negotiation too with the going through the realtors and stuff, trying to
Yeah.
calling my like parents and stuff. I'm like, hey, like, what do I do? And they're like, this is your deal. They're like, time to be a big boy and like kind of own it. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess I'll just do whatever I want to do.
Which that's what you have a realtor for, that I guess, is when
Right,
you're doing it on market. It's like they're negotiating it. But
right.
so they just eventually agreed, yeah, we're going to leave the furniture and pay the closing costs.
Yep.
Dang, that's just so crazy.
So yeah, it only really took capital wise like that 10,000 down payment for me, and then
Mm,
I spent another probably another couple grand doing getting changing up a little bit of the furniture, putting in the projector screen, putting in a ping pong table, and then the backyard it already had like a slab back there for a grill, stuff like that, but ended up building a fire pit,
yeah,
laying all the gravel, building, the wood beams to hang string lights from, and kind of making a cool little outdoor area. And I was like, screw it,
yeah,
I'm just gonna. I mean, Yeah, I'm in school right now, but I mean, school's not the most time-consuming thing for me right
I
now.
thought you were about
So
to say it's not the most important thing, which maybe that's true too, though.
no, but I
We
was like,
gotta
I'm
we
just
gotta
gonna
show that picture of it though. It's sweet. So you added those like Airbnb is all about the experience, the pictures. So he added those, poles with the lights hanging from it. Was it a fire pit or is it just chairs?
Yeah, it's a fire pit,
Fire
so it's
pit.
got a which is cool because I mean it's a huge selling point, right? So I mean
Mm.
even the guys I've got somebody who's checked in maybe 5 minutes ago actually. So
Yeah,
Ben texts me all day. He's like, hey, we can't wait to use the fire pit. So that's where I was before
that's
this was
funny.
running over some lighter fluid for them before
Hope
they
that your
checked in.
house is
I
stays
know,
intact.
right?
That's funny. I have a fire pit too, and I don't think I've had anyone text me before saying they're pumped about it. But
I know this guy's
um,
hyped, man. He's
yeah,
he's excited for the fire pit.
he's
So
throwing a party or something.
hopefully not.
But that's crazy. Yeah, he ended up using that as your picture. We'll show that maybe. But super good job. He was out there digging. I remember I came over and you were digging holes in there. But yeah, so you're 10 grand in to get to the actual numbers now. So you put this money in. You're trying to figure out is this going to cash flow? You're looking at what AirDNA, or you're looking at what we profited. It's pretty comparable houses, right?
Right. Yeah, just looking at comps, kind of, I mean, honestly, yours was a pretty good comp for me. David's was a good comp for me as well. And then Airdina had pulled some too. So there are probably some more resources I could have looked at, but after looking at that, I felt comfortable enough where I was like,
Yeah,
this is going to do well. So
yeah. So you go in, and this is like February, March of your
February.
junior year.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good time on it. That's when I closed on mine because that's the
hmm
slowest time was January, February for Airbnb. But you get it listed. You had to now put it in your name. You didn't take over their listing, right?
No.
Okay.
So I had to completely put it in my name, start it over with reviews, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So.
So you put it in your name, and then you get the pictures up. You did some adjustments on those rooms. What happened from there? Because I know this is crazy
So yeah,
on return.
finally got it listed in like it was pretty late February. It might have even been right at the start of March, and a couple weeks go by, and kind of talking to you, and I'm like, hey, let's juice this thing up for a little bit. Ben actually books it for one night, writes me a sweet little review, right? But I'm like, at this point I'm 2 weeks into it now, and I'm like, I'm sitting in Cabo in a hot tub actually. So and
Oh,
I'm like,
spring break, right?
yeah, so it's
Oh,
spring
I
break.
remember this. This feels like yesterday.
I know. So sitting in a hot tub in Cabo, and I'm like these whole like 15, 16 days, whatever it was, because I think the first booking was for March 16th. I'm like, damn man, like did I mess up? Like did I
Yeah.
do something? Like did I get way in over my head? Like total expenses, I've got like without cleaning fees about $1,700, $1,800 worth of expenses, and then
Yeah.
paying a cleaner per trip on top of that. But I don't have any trips right now, so I'm like, did I just cost myself almost $2,000 a month type thing? Phone dings and it's my first booking now. So I'm like, awesome. It's this guy with no profile picture. His name is Bill. And I'm like, is this fake? Like, is this
Go
some,
Bill.
right? I'm like, is this kind of, yeah, shout out Bill, man. Is this some kind of scammer? But turns out, right, I'm a new property. I don't have any bookings, right? My calendar is wide open. So this guy books for like 45 days, like something crazy. Like their house got hit, with hailstorms and they filed an insurance claim and they had to move out.
That was right
Right.
after the tornadoes here, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's what it was. It was tornadoes.
Yeah.
So books like 45 days, and the payout's like $4,500 or something. And I'm like looking at this thing. I'm like texting Ben. I was like, hey, I think I just got my first booking. And he's like, nice, like way to go. And I sent you a screenshot. I'm like, I think it's like $4,500. So like, does this look legit? And you're like, holy hell, dude, like this is crazy. After that, they end up staying there for a while. They were awesome people. I was paying a little bit more attention to them because it was kind of where they were living full time since their house was being redone. And, he asked me, he says, hey, things are behind with repairs, insurance, all that kind of stuff. And at this point, I'm like, okay, well, he's going to stay, past May. This is a really big kind of season for me with graduation, all this kind of stuff. And he was like, just name your price and we'll do it. And I looked at my calendar and I was like, listen, with Airbnb, all these fees you're going to have to pay, what my nightly rates are with graduation, spring game, all these kind of high ticket nights. Through Airbnb, you're gonna have to pay like $7,500, $8,000 to stay here for another month. I was like, you cut me a grand or a check for 6 grand, we'll just call it good. He's like, okay, let's do it. And I'm like, all right, let's
Jeez,
do it. I'll be
that
like,
is nuts.
in the matter of maybe 2 months, pretty much all my capital is pretty much returned. And I'm like, okay, I can breathe a little easier now, right? I still got a monthly payment to make, but this huge, right, the biggest purchase I've ever made in my life, right,
Yeah,
where I felt like I was for 15 days, like shot myself in the foot, just threw 10 grand down the drain. I'm like, well, over half of it's back. I was like,
Yeah.
this can't be that bad, right? So it was pretty cool.
So within the first, basically your first booking, I'm your first booking. If
Yeah.
anyone didn't hear
Okay.
that, I basically booked his place to put a 5-star review on there and
Got Bill.
get his thing rolling. So
Got
that
Bill to
guy
book.
Bill was probably pumped because he's like, okay,
He's
Ben
like,
said this place was awesome. But then Bill goes in there, older guy. The house gets unfortunately messed up in a tornado in Norman, and books basically a $10,000 $10,500 that you ended up getting for 2 months.
pretty close. I mean, yeah,
Oh, essentially, right?
pretty much. I mean, the guy. I mean, the insurance is paying for it. So I mean, he
Yeah,
doesn't care. He's like, I'll pay you whatever you want, dude. It's like, just let me
yeah.
know.
Should have
So
named said it. Should have said 8 grand.
I
You didn't
honestly,
let him meet you in the middle.
honestly should have, but
Take another trip to Cabo. That's crazy. So now when you look at cash on cash return with this is just like one of those things that's kind of just a home run, probably an anomaly that you can get these returns, but you didn't necessarily expect this to happen.
right.
So you get 10,000 in, you put a few extra, you're in 12,000 maybe, and then in 2 months you get 10,000 back, and then from there, you start getting normal bookings on Airbnb,
Yep.
and then
Summertime's just kind of rolling. It's pretty busy during the summertime in Norman.
yeah,
So people coming for baseball, softball tournaments, seeing family, kids out on school, whatever it is. So
right. So then at the end of the year, I mean, I'm gonna assume you brought in, aside from him, another 6 to 10 grand maybe.
I think on average, cash flowing most months anywhere from $500-600. So
Yeah.
higher months are around $1,000 in cash flow. So
Okay. So yeah, let's say 500, 3 grand. Yeah, I mean that's over 1,000% cash on cash return, or 100%.
yeah.
So that is that's crazy. You get all of it back and then some in year one. So now you're just as
I
long as you
mean,
cover it.
even now it's been 8 months. I've still got 4 months to go. So
Yeah.
until I hit that February year one mark. So
Oh, sure, because it's only been okay. Yeah, it's almost been a year next February.
yeah.
Yeah, 8 months or so. That's crazy. So a little bit higher. I was a little worried too. I was like, I don't know if that payment will work. I mean, it'll still cash flow, but it won't be anything crazy. Like you get to own an asset, it'll appreciate. Norman's gonna keep going up. We're going to
Right.
the SEC.
And that was my thought with it too was, sure interest rates are higher than they've been the last few years, buying a house at 6%, but with the way that market shift had gone, I'm like, okay, well now I'm buying a house at the right price for a higher
Yeah.
interest rate, right? The
Right.
192 is good. Like that makes sense for this home with the furniture and closing
Yeah.
costs and all that kind of stuff too. But, my intention was, I'm going to refinance this in a couple years anyways and get, my grandparents kicked off the
Yeah.
title too, because I don't want to share that liability. Although it's doing great now, and
Yeah.
they're happy they did it for me. I just would rather have their name off of it. So,
I'm
but
pretty sure after, don't quote me on this, but I think after a year of having a cosigner can get it removed from their debt to income at least. I don't know if it completely takes them off, but my dad got some sort of update on that after a year where it doesn't affect his debt to income. But yeah, that's cool. So I mean, who knows if we'll even where the interest rates will go. That's why a lot of people are
Right.
afraid because like interest rates are high. It's like I don't want to buy. It's like, well, there's a lot more options to negotiate those things.
Well, and that's like the thing now too is, I could have waited and said that like, oh, I'll wait 6 months and get a house once interest rates drop or whatever. But I mean, interest rates now,
Yeah.
8%. I got it at 6, and people now buying houses would kill for 6% interest rate.
Yeah,
So
exactly. That's nuts. So cash on cash return over 100%, and now it's pretty much just in your pocket as long as you can cover those payments.
right.
Hopefully, when OU takes on the SEC and can start winning football games, the prices here will keep going up. I'm
Yeah.
like, I was almost pissed whenever you got that. I was like so pumped for you, and then I was like, dang it, I should have got 2 of these because I was trying to get something in Dallas to house hack
Right.
whenever I came back, and then that was when the rates were going up, and I was like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I didn't know what creative finance was. I remember I went in on a house in Prosper. It was just like a 3-bed, 2-bath, one of the cheapest ones out there. It was like $375, which at a 3% rate would have been perfect. Would have house hacked it and made money.
Right.
But house hack just means you live in one room, you rent out the other. So if my payment's $2,000 a month and I'm renting each room for $800, I'm basically living for $400 a month. But when the interest rates went up to 7%, and now I'm looking at this house, I put down 10% or whatever it was, and my payment was like $3,100 to $3,200 a month on like a $375,000 house that wasn't that special.
Right.
It's nice. It's in a great area. I'm like, this is gonna be worth a lot more. So I was
Mhm.
almost ready to like go through with it. And the last day of the option period, I backed out, which I wish I would have known about creative finance then, because I think I could have made it work with those
Mhm.
sellers, but I had no idea what that was. Like, they wanted out, but I just couldn't make the payments work at that
Right.
amount. So I just took off the gas a little bit, and then I was like, finished solar. And then when I started figuring out about subject to seller finance, like I could have been buying properties this whole time,
Mhm.
not necessarily all to house hack, but
Right.
just as investments at 3-4% interest rates if I can go find them. Right, they're not necessarily going to be sitting on the market. Maybe they are if they have low equity, but that's what's crazy. So I ended up not doing that one. And then I remember you bought your first property at that same time. I was like, I should have just gone to Oklahoma again, but 20% down on another one would have been the same amount because it's so much cheaper.
Right.
And it had a second Airbnb. But I'm glad you got that. That was sweet. And then we now get to compete with the bookings. So,
Yep.
but
The
I get, what were you
we
gonna say?
got in at a good time, I think. I think especially in, one of the big things for me when looking at, Norman was definitely like, okay, I think I want to buy in Norman, but we still kind
Yeah.
of looked at a couple areas too. It would have been much harder to manage further away too. But when looking at it and moving to the SEC, how much construction they're talking about doing to the campuses and building new areas, and I mean, I just think the bubble in Norman's going to explode, and that we got in
Yeah.
at the right time. So
We're starting to see it too. I mean, I look at properties that I'm like, people are listing smaller than this that are set up for Airbnb, and they're selling it for like 200 something. I'm like,
yeah, well, I mean, even
what?
I get emails from Zillow like once a
Yeah,
month. It's like your home's now worth this, this, and this. I'm like,
yeah.
okay, well, that's more than I bought it for. So nice. I'll take that.
That's awesome. So that's the whole breakdown of that deal, which I don't even know how long we've been talking here, but what's it say? We got like 52 minutes, but the biggest thing that was just your junior year. So to get quick onto this, why you're able to even be successful on it, you went back. Obviously, you made 35, 40 grand that first
Hmm.
summer. Now you go back and to do solar again, and this is when I'm like starting to do everything with real
Right.
estate. I had the team coming out. We're like another summer ready for solar, and then I knew you were ready to step into closing because you started doing. I think you closed one deal the last week you were there for your first summer. Because I
Yeah.
was like, let's just see if you can get one. So when you came back this first summer, you ended up self-genning, meaning you set your own appointments, close your own deals. I ended up basically getting too busy with real estate. I just stepped out and I was like, hey, Peter, you're closing these now. So we had Jay Z managing it, closing, and then we needed someone else to be able to fill in the spots that I wasn't doing. So
Hmm.
luckily you were there because I couldn't have probably been comfortable doing that if you weren't in
Right.
that place. But you had your brother out, a few other setters. How much, I guess, what was it like transitioning from setting appointments to actually going and close?
It was one of those opportunities that I was extremely excited to do, where I was, I'd always like more opportunity or more responsibility, and I knew I was capable of it. I'd
Mm-hmm.
again seen the proof of concept with it last year, and knew with the knowledge I had, setting and what I had learned, sales wise, that I was going to be able to do it, and saw immediate success with it. I mean, I ended up self-genning more deals than I ended up closing setting
Yeah,
the year before.
probably because
So
you were closing them. I
I think
wasn't.
that's probably, you're right. Ben just sucks, but no, I'm just kidding. But that's a big part of it too, is being the guy who knocks on the door, to being the guy who's
At the
actually
table.
right, actually at the table signing the deal too, where it's not you know me setting it. And we made a great duo, and I thought our personalities matched enough to where people like really liked us together. But it was, you'd get to the door and you'd have to
Yeah,
rebuild all the rapport kind of thing. But it would, closing was definitely a lot of fun.
yeah,
Some crazy stories that
oh
we could
yeah.
probably sit here and talk about
I wish
for
we would have got
hours.
more time with this. This is like a real estate podcast, but I love diving into the sales aspect because this kid, like, not talk, like, no joke, one of the best sales guys I've been around at such a young age too. Like, I feel like I learned it and maybe had that personality too, but a lot of it is just learned, and like the
Right.
persistence, the amount of times I went into deals that Peter set for me that these people, I'd show up to the door and they got like huge no soliciting signs. Like, you can tell,
Signs that say we
yeah,
shoot, our dog
yeah,
eats. Yeah.
do not knock, no knocking. And then I go in there and like they're cool. They're like love. They're hyping up Peter like he was awesome. That guy's super persistent. I remember one of the deals we got, a car salesman. He's like, so much respect for that kid. Like, he just kept going and wouldn't take no for an answer. And it's like he just loved the fact that you basically knew, you sounded professional. You wouldn't stop. And then
Pleasantly persistent.
exactly, and like most kids probably never knocked on those doors, and like yeah, you could get someone coming off hot, and I'm sure you got that a lot. Like when
Oh
we talk
yeah.
about stories, I would get in my car at night, and Peter had so many witty, like the most sales, but also the most amount of people in the neighborhood that hated him. Like there was definitely times we had to switch neighborhoods for him because they were calling the cops on him because he said some sort of backhanded comment or was just knocking
I was
on.
probably a little too slick for my own good sometimes
Yeah.
with some of the
How many
comments.
times do you think you had the cops called on you?
Oh man, I don't know. It was always fine though because I just talk them off a ledge, right? Or
Yeah,
you would or whatever. But definitely a handful, maybe
yeah.
5, 6. So yeah,
5 or 6. I don't think I've had that. I probably had it happen twice ever, and I didn't even know about it. But you knew when they were coming. Like you could feel it. But
oh yeah.
that's crazy. So you go in the next year, you end up closing probably what? Like was it almost how many deals was it?
Is I closed some for some of our setters, but it was somewhere in the range of 18, 19 self gens, something like that. So, uh,
Meaning
it
you
was a
set
pretty
the
good year.
appointment and then you closed it.
Right, I set the appointment, I closed it, and then
So that means you just take the full commission. You're not splitting that with anyone.
right, exactly.
Okay, so then you had all that come in. Solar obviously changed a little bit too. Interest rates went up. It was like different factors that everyone was kind of complaining about, or it was harder in a sense. But
Right.
um,
Which really, at the end of the day, I mean, people talk a lot about that, make a lot of excuses. I just,
yeah,
I ended up now where I am being thankful for that, knowing that, hey, I was put in a tougher environment and,
yeah,
came
I
out
get it.
still making more money than I did the first
Yeah.
year. So,
So that
I was
second
thankful for
year, you had all the installs come in. Obviously, you got experience now with cancels on your end. I'm sure that was tough. But how many did you have cancel on those first ones, or just in general?
I think I was like, I think it was 7 out of my first 8 ended up canceling, or 8 on my first 9. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a rough little streak where I was, it was
Jeez.
almost like it felt like that beginner's luck where I was sitting down in, 2 spots like all
Yeah.
the time. Where I was like, I mean, those first like 10 deals came in the first like 2 weeks where I was just like
Yeah.
ripping them off.
Signing
Yeah,
everyone.
I was
This is
like,
easy, and then you
yeah,
realize you're like maybe they didn't get installed. I didn't get paid.
yeah.
So then you ended the summer with almost like what 20 deals. How many did you get installed? I guess how much do you think you made versus the first summer?
I don't remember the final install number. For some reason, I just paid way less attention to my numbers this year because I was
Yeah.
like, I'm closing, whatever happens happens type thing. Where I
Yeah.
feel like you're the setter. You're like, hey, like, how are we doing? Like, is this
Yeah.
going through? Did you talk to Janice? Whatever kind of thing. But uh, ended up making like 50,000, just shy of 50,000 this second year. So
That's crazy. Yeah. And that was just you going in there and throwing down for 3 months. And then you got to bring your brother out too.
yeah,
Get him
that
involved.
was a
Set.
pretty cool experience with having
Yeah.
him out there. So
Got to close some deals for him. Shout out Harry. He's a character.
he is a
So you
character.
come back now. I mean, how would you say as far as real estate goes? Because you got that deal. That was you're junior in college. I know now the real estate market's obviously changed even more. But what
Right.
is your goal moving forward with real estate and just graduating and everything?
Well,
Putting you on the spot.
yeah, you know, my goal, my long-winded goal, of course, and this is kind of what I've been saying since I got the first one, was eventually I want to get to the point where every destination I want to go, I want to have a property that I can
Yeah.
short-term rental out, whether that's, you know, somewhere to ski, somewhere to go to the
Yeah.
beach, up here at OU, I love OU football. I got one here where I know
Yeah.
I can always stay somewhere for OU football, one in, Europe or something. So that's more so long-term goal. Short-term, having to get, obviously, the whole point of the podcast is get a little bit more creative now, where it's tough for me to continue to ask grandparents, hey, can you do this again, can you do this maybe 2 or 3 more times kind of thing, where I've started working with you and Alex and looking at these sub-2 creating finance deals where it's, hey, how can we get more of these deals in a quicker amount of time without involving a bank kind
Yeah.
of thing. So
Right. Yeah, no, it is crazy because it's not something I ever knew about until we got deep into some of these networks and found some of our first deals. But yeah, Peter's gone on our dialer a few times. He gets cold calling. I'm still following up with a handful of his leads. He's probably only called like 5 times, and every time he does, I have like 2 appointments. So the dude knows how to sell for sure and can close anyone in whether it's real estate or alarms or solar. So it's cool. You're finishing school what the end of May next year?
finish school in May. Yep.
Okay. Trying to get into a sales position, finance. What do you want to do?
Yeah,
Solar.
it's pretty tough for, after seeing how lucrative and successful I can be in sales, to be like,
Yeah.
nah,
Yeah.
want to go in a different direction kind of thing. But yeah, want to get into a sales, possibly real estate role, whatever it ends up being, and you know, work some kind of job, and then use my other time to kind of dive into some of the creative sub-to stuff, and see what I can kind of cook up like you guys are, I guess. So.
Yeah. Well, I think you can definitely do it just like we'd have. And I'm not there at all. I'm sure in 6 months, whenever you're graduating, we'll have a lot different outlook from when we're sitting here now. But that's sweet. Congrats on everything that you have done. I mean,
Thanks,
it's
bro.
crazy to see that you got all that done before
I
you
like
even
I like to
graduated
consider
college.
myself your little shadow, I guess. I just kind of
Yeah.
do everything you do a year after you do. So we'll see.
Well,
Hopefully you don't get you don't die next year. 'Cause
Jeez.
yeah.
Yeah, knock on wood. Let's keep the trajectory going forward. But yeah, I'll have to get you another solar. Sorry, real estate deal, not solar. If you want to close a solar deal, I'm sure you can do that right now too. And then we can maybe get on the podcast again. But
Yep.
episode 4 out.